Hello and welcome to the CEO Sitdown. I am so sorry we are running a little behind. This was not intentional, unfortunately. Technology, we love it, especially here at Live Fearless. However, sometimes it likes to fight us, and today is one of those it likes to fight us kinds of days. You know what? I need to make sure that we won't be interrupted. So let me put this on. There we go. Perfection. So we are here as we are every week to answer and ask questions about your business, your mindset, and your leadership. This is really a time for you to ask any questions you might have ever thought of when it comes to building a business, building a ministry, building a nonprofit, even your leadership styles, how to help you with a problem, anything and everything that you would ever want to ask a CEO that's been there probably 10 times over. I haven't found a question so far that I haven't dealt with at some point in my life. If you have any questions during the live stream, make sure to drop them in the box below. We will get them as soon as we can. If we miss your question and or you are watching the replay and have a question, we do have ways for you to get your answers. One, submit them to my DMs at Live Fearless CEO on any platform. You can email us at livefearlessmedia@gmail.com. That is our general inbox where we can check in on anything you are thinking about. Last but not least, we do have a private community group, the Live Fearless Inner Circle, that is available to you all, where a lot of the questions that we don't get to still get answered, because that community group gets one-on-one access to me on a regular basis, which for some of you think that's a great thing. For some of you, you're probably sitting there going, what? Why would I care? Anyways, let us jump into the questions and not waste any more time. Okay, so how do you stay hopeful when growth feels so slow? All right. If you are unawares of this, there's no such thing as an overnight success. This is something that I had to be more taught, despite the fact that I knew it in concept. Everybody these days sees a very curated feed through social media, right? We see all the highlights, the wins, the major things, and very rarely does anybody post how much time it took to get to that win. And very rarely does anybody share like how many times you failed before you got to that win. And very rarely does anybody share how hard the path was to get there. So feeling like it's slow, first of all, let me say you are not alone. Everybody feels like that in their business, even when they're winning. Let me tell you, even when they're winning, it can still feel slow. I know there have been times where there have been things where I thought they would just take off and explode. And it took a year, 2 years before I can make it work. My first offer was a free offer, and it took nearly 4 months, 5 months of trucking it around to get one bite. Now, admittedly, when I made that first offer, I had no idea what I was doing. That also helps to have support that actually knows what they're doing. I did not. But feeling like it's slow, being okay with it being slow, that's kind of the game you've got to play in your mind. You've got to be okay with it feeling slow, because between the internet and social media, we've gotten into this world where it feels like it's just rapid pace at all times, but that's not really the way this works. Business building is a significant process. And even if the press calls something an overnight success, most likely people have been working on for years before the press ever picked up on it. And let me give you the real world example that is not my own. let's look at, oh gosh, my brain, Airbnb. Airbnb. For years, it took years. Let me get the exact number. How many Airbnb to turn a profit? I should have looked this up beforehand. I had this question and I didn't. It took 9 years. Everybody talks about from the very beginning, Airbnb was a success. Everybody loved it. It took 9 years for Airbnb to turn a profit. And by the way, its first full year of profit, meaning like they just had a half where they made a profit. Their first full year of profit was in 2022, post the pandemic, when everybody was using Airbnb because of the fact that we had a pandemic going on. So the reality is, just because something looks like a success on the top doesn't mean that they're not swimming like ducks underneath. You know what I mean? If you don't get the concept, ducks' little feet go like this, yet they glide along the pond at a very smooth, slow rate. Everything looks hunky-dory. It looks like they're flying high. They look like they're one of the best companies in the world, yet they did not turn a full year's worth of profit until 2022. That's a lot of putting in the work, being willing to sacrifice, being willing to say it's not winning, iterating, reiterating, and it's time. Very rarely are things what they appear on the surface. So as you're looking at all these things that are blowing up and seem to be blowing up fast, most likely people have been working on them for years, at least months, if not years. So don't worry so much about how fast things or how slow things are going. Hold on to the fact that you're doing that. That's the big thing, right? So how do I hold on to it when the growth feels slow? One, the dream. You have to know the dream. You have to know the purpose, the why behind the dream. And you've got to know how you're moving from point A to point B. Now you can iterate and reiterate how that path looks. So if you need to pivot or change something, that's completely fine. But you got to know where you're starting. You got to know where you're ending. You've got to know how to measure it, and you got to know why you're doing it. If you don't know these things, then the slow is going to slog you down until you lose it, in all honesty. If you do know these things, then the slow doesn't feel so slow because there's always something else to look at. Have you ever felt like walking away from it all, what pulled you back in? Yeah, going back to the slow, the idea of everybody looks like they're succeeding when you're not. I have had many, many times where I wanted to walk away. That's the honest to God truth about what entrepreneurship is like. There are times where you're going to want to walk away. Everybody comes to that point where it feels like too much, where too many things are going wrong, where you're hitting wall after wall after wall after wall. And I've been there. Heck, I've had one of those moments a couple months ago where it just wasn't working. And you have a choice. You have a choice to hold on to that dream, that purpose, that mission that you've created for yourself. And you have a choice to hold on to your personal, why are you doing this? Or you have the choice to let it all go. You have a choice to say that the vision wasn't the vision. You have the choice to say that what you thought was your God-given purpose, maybe not your God-given purpose. And you have to look at yourself for that, right? You have to sit there and say, was I created for this? Was I following down the path of my God-given path? Am I doing the things I need to do? Why am I doing these things? Is my why impactful enough to keep me in the process, right? All of these things. Hold on, sorry, I'm getting a sorry, I'm getting a message from my team that I needed to address. So you have the choice. You have the choice to hold on to these things and say, this was God-given, and I'm going to hold on and keep pursuing. And maybe I'm iterating and I'm pivoting and I'm changing the way I do things, but I'm still trying and I'm still moving towards. Or you have the choice to let it go. And maybe you find that the season is ended. There are seasons for people, right? There are seasons where we go into these things that we are hard, and we go through a process and we learn, and maybe God is taking us out of it so we can do it in another way. If you find that the door is closed over and over and over again, then maybe you need to walk away from it. But if the doors are not closed, it just doesn't, it's been hard, or it feels like you personally in your head are getting in your own way, then maybe you need to get out of your head, into your heart, into your why, into your purpose, and step into that unafraid. If the doors are solidly closed, the doors are solidly closed. There's nothing you can do about that. But sometimes we, in our fear, choose to close the doors instead of letting God close those doors. So you need to really carefully look at them and see if the exhaustion or the stress of it all that is causing you to think about quitting is informed by you or something else. Because sometimes we are our own worst enemies when it comes to a process we put ourselves through, especially in business. There's a reason why we talk mindset on this platform, why we talk about spiritual wellness, why I say entrepreneurship is a mind, body, spirit game, because the reality is, you have to think about your mindset. You have to think about your spiritual position. You have to think about your perfect purpose. You have to think about your God-given dreams. If you leave these things out of the equation, then you end up running up against doors that you created for yourself. Those are doors you created for yourself. So check and make sure this wasn't something you ran up against just because you wanted to. Because our brains are very good at tricking us into wanting to run into pain. Trust me. Let's get into some of the business questions. How do I delegate without feeling guilty or disappointed? This is a really good one. Admittedly, I didn't get to really look at the questions before today's CEO sit down with the technology issues we had. So this is a really good question, because admittedly, for those of us, especially if you're early on in your entrepreneurship journey, or you start your entrepreneurship journey earlier on in your career, have not been used to delegating. And you're not used to giving your work away and making somebody else do it. A lot of times we get in this place where we can do it, or we can do it better, or I don't want to bother somebody with, especially women. Women, we do this very significantly. I don't want to bother somebody with this. I'll do it myself. Sound familiar, ladies? Like, I do this. I have done this. Here's the thing. You have to put a value on your time and your skills. When you run a business, when you operate a business, you do not, when you run a business, you operate a business. But here's the thing, operating a business and running a business, two different things. It's the idea of working in versus on the business. And if, especially in your early days as an entrepreneur, when you run slim and or it's just you in some cases, it's very easy to say, I don't need to hire that contractor because it'll save me money. Like, it's very easy to say, I can do it myself. It's very easy to say, I don't want to delegate this, or I want to be a part of this. Also, when you get exciting projects in, so when you get a really exciting client that you really want to work with, but you don't have the time in your schedule, yeah, it's really hard to keep your hands off. Speaking from experience, it's really hard to keep your hands off. You have to be okay with handing things over. You have to be okay with handing things over because of the fact that you have to work in the business and on the business in the same amount of time. The only other option, by the way, is to give yourself more hours in the day to work. And so if you're constantly having to work in the business and on the business and you're never delegating anything, you literally will do nothing but work. Or you have to be okay with never scaling. Those are the options. You cannot scale as a one-woman or a one-man band. It only goes so far. You can do a lot of things with AI. You can do a lot of things with automation. AI and automation, technically different things these days. Although a lot of AI can automate and a lot of automation can use AI. They're still different things. You can do a lot of things with software. You can do a lot of things with scheduling. You can do a lot of things with a lot of things. But eventually, every single resource is finite. And the most finite resource you have is your time. So you have to decide what is important and what is not. And if it's more important for you to be working on the business structure and as the CEO, then that's what you have to do. Same thing happens in ministry. Same thing happens in nonprofits. By the way, for those of you out there and in ministry or nonprofits who are catching this, and I talk from the entrepreneur's perspective, the business perspective, because that's what I am. But here's one major mindset thing I need you all to grasp. If you're in ministry right now and catching this live, or you are in nonprofits and catching this live, or the replays. The only difference between a business and a nonprofit and a ministry is how we use the money and how we account for it. The actual accounting is different and how we utilize money is different. However, sales, marketing, branding, leadership, business structures, all of those things still occur on both sides of the equation. CEO, development. Well, no, CEO is director, executive director, specifically. These are equivalent positions, just in two different organizations. They're the leads of the organization. CFO, over here, Chief of Finances. Director of Financial Operations, same job. Marketing, CMO. Director of Marketing, same job. The needs of the individual organization will be different, but the needs of the position will not. So the reality is, when we talk about things as business and entrepreneurship, everything I talk on, just substitute the words in your head, ministry or nonprofit. Do not think that anything I say doesn't apply to you, including this. So, delegation, structure, being able to pass things on, creating systems of how people operate underneath you. Systems will be actually probably your best way, because then you have no excuse. If your system says that this person does this responsibility and role and does this job for you, then you have to let them do it, because that is their job. So it's the easiest way is to create hierarchies and systems to make sure you actually do delegate this across. But you've also got to mentally come to the place where it says, my time is too valuable to waste doing small tasks. And I either need to hire a contractor, or I need to hire an employee, or I need to find somebody, in some cases volunteers, to do the job for me, so that I can make sure that I can grow this. Because there will always come a limitation on your ability to grow something if you do not delegate. Your ability to grow your business is finite alone. However, it is infinite if you're willing to delegate, and delegate correctly. How do you stay creative while still managing the operations of a business? Yeah, this is a really good question also. I look at operations as a creative pursuit, in all honesty, because what I'm looking at has changed. I think most people these days, they put creative in this box that is not necessarily the reality, right? So I think we create this box for creatives that says, like, unless you're creating an image or writing something or producing a video or doing something in social media content creation, you're not a creative, which is not necessarily true. I have a friend of mine who works entirely in what he calls creative business structures. And the idea is using creative thinking to create business structures that actually will operate for a business more effectively and more efficiently than the traditional. Rewriting roles, doing new operational tasks, finding new ways of creating flow from start to finish. You need to look at your business as a whole as a creative endeavor, and not just the actual creative tasks. And that's a big thing for a creative entrepreneur like myself, or like many of you out there who are in my audience. You have to take it beyond just the systems of it all, and say that, how am I going to creatively think about these systems? I personally do brain maps of my systems. So if you don't know what brain mapping is, I put like a central idea and then I start branching out. That is a very creative way to create a systems map. Some people like to, I also do a lot of journaling. This is also my biggest outlet. This is my personal one. This is a client journal. So anytime I'm trying to be creative on behalf of a client, these are mostly consulting clients these days. And this is one just for Live Fearless Media ideas. So I journal a lot. I do things that inspire creativity, but I do them around operations and task management and systems and software and analytics. There are ways to make these things creative endeavors. And it's all a matter of shifting your mindset on what these things are, because I think a lot of creatives avoid these more systematic tasks because we think of them as boring traditionally. If you can get your brain to think of these things as a new kind of puzzle, or a new way to think of a growth opportunity, or a new way to communicate, then your brain will start accepting these tasks that seem operational in nature as creative tasks. If you're consistently looking at them as a drag, then you will never enjoy them ever. Period. End of story. It doesn't matter what you do to them. So you have to look at them as things that help you with growth. You have to look at them I personally look at them as a puzzle. How do I puzzle together the pieces to make the picture become clear specifically for my business. Everybody has their own kind of way, depending on how your brain works, of reframing this, but find a way to reframe those tasks so that they do look like something you would actually enjoy doing. If I hate launching, what are my alternatives? Okay, so launching, the way people use launching now is not how we used to use launching 10 years ago, right? And I personally like the old way better than the new way. Everybody seems to think that you've constantly got to be in launch mode. And the reality is, if you build a product or service the correct way, you shouldn't have to be in launch mode a significant amount of time. Maybe once a year. Or if it's a brand new product, look, if it's a brand new product or service, don't just throw out a random ad, do a launch. The reason I say do a launch with a brand new product or service is because you want to create hyper excitement around something that has never had hyper excitement. Now, here's the thing about launch strategies these days. A lot of people just consistently are running launches, right? Every time they do a new sign up, there's a new launch. And it feeds off this idea of a limited time offer. So like you have this short amount of time to get into this group and you're going to wait again. And then you'll launch again. And so I'm going to be very honest with you, majority of people that use launch style do not actually close their offers. This is a very unknown secret. When they do those launches, they'll do them like 4 times a year, and they will never actually close that offer. They just go at it again with some sort of either pre-recorded that they run like it is alive, or they'll run a live like we're doing right now. I don't really love that. Unless it's a brand new product or service that does not have energy around it, I don't believe in launching. I believe in more evergreen style advertising marketing in order to keep things generating. So creating a true system within your marketing and sales process that keeps things coming back around, especially with colder leads. Because the reality is, here's the biggest issue with things these days. It used to be that it was like 2-3 touches in order to get a conversion. You still don't get conversion 99% of the time. Even back in the day, you did not get conversion on the first time around. So it usually took 2 or 3. Then it was 7 to 10. Now we're looking at, because things are so flooded and there's so much competition for the space, we're looking for significantly more touches. You can be upwards, depending on your company and what you do and what industry you're in, upwards of 15, 20. I've got one that's at like 35 right now to convert. The cost of acquisition and the number of touches it takes to convert these days is significantly higher. So what you need to do is create a reoccurring thing that puts people back into your pipeline over and over again. Launches don't do that, right? The idea of a launch is you're going to put them back in, like in a new pipeline each time. That doesn't work. Not really. So finding a way to keep yourself evergreen. I like running evergreen advertising. In all honesty, I like selling through organic social. I think a lot of people write off organic social and do that all as like free stuff. Not always. You should sell through organic social. You should sell through these conversations. Things work out better than you think, I guarantee you. The other thing you can be doing is creating a true sales and marketing pipeline. Now, this is not just funnels, right? This is creating multiple levels at which you market people, how you market to people, different types of marketing, whether that's email, socials, paid advertising. This also should include actual landing pages, the whole system. You've got to create an actual sales and marketing system, not just the offer, but the actual system that kind of feeds and refeeds and refeeds and refeeds. And the nice thing is, if you can manage to get somebody into the pipeline once, it'll keep going. I promise it will keep going. That is the big thing with all of this. All right. If you want to know more about how to build a sales and marketing system, there's a couple of different ways I can help you with that. Check out livefearlessmedia.com, or if you are just looking for somebody to run questions by on the sales and marketing pipelines that you can build and systems you can build, we talk about these a lot in my private community group, the Live Fearless Inner Circle. That is a big part of what we do there. And for those of you who are having a hard time, because I know I have a lot of nonprofit leaders who join us for this, or having a hard time hearing sales and marketing, think sales and development and fundraising. So development and fundraising stands in for sales and marketing in the nonprofit world. Like I said, these things are basically equivalent. The only difference is how we use the funds. I say this all the time. All right, let's do one last question, then we'll jump off. Sorry, guys, we got a lot of them. I'm trying to think what would be the most useful to you all. Okay, let's go. What are your favorite ways to test an idea before building it out fully? So one of my favorite ways to do this is actually through building out smaller funnels with free giveaways. If I can get somebody to take my free thing and then, oh, by the way, there's a trick to this. We're going to get there. So stick with me. If I can get somebody into my funnel, and this is a small funnel, this is not a crazy funnel, and you can do this completely through organic social if you have enough of a following there. You do not have to do paid ads, but you have to have some sort of social media something that leads to a very small funnel, a one-page landing page. I talk about this all the time. One-page landing pages are the way to go over large websites. If you can't develop a full website, this is also another reason why one-page landing page is the way to go, because this is a very simple way. You create a small offer with a free item. You get to collect information for that, right? So they're going to give you their email address. More importantly, with this, test for the cell phone number. This is the big thing. Test for the cell phone number. If people are willing to give you both their email address and their cell phone number in order to get this, you know that you've at least got something that has some interest. Why is that? Because our cell phone numbers, these little devices, yeah, they're sacred to us. We get so much junk through these items, whether that's through this or through our emails. Emails, it's a lot easier to ignore. Cell phones, not so much. So if they're willing to hand you their cell phone number, they at least want to know more about you. This is one way you can test whether or not that is an audience member that is willing to warm up to you. So if you are somebody who in the past only collected email addresses, start collecting cell phone numbers in your free giveaway. Create a small free giveaway. This can be something very small, as if it was a quiz that will give them some sort of answer. This can be like a one-pager instructional. This can be something small that directly relates to whatever you want to sell in the long term, right? And then you step by step build this thing out and you test each level. So we're going to go from the small funnel that was off organic social with getting the cell phone numbers, and we're going to take that, if we find interest, and we're going to turn that into something a little bit larger, and then a little bit larger, and a little bit larger. If you want to learn how to build an offer, our private community, Live Fearless Inner Circle, is probably the place for you to be. Again, we talk about development offers as well as business offers. So check that out. You can go to my.livefearlessmedia.com/inner-circle. We'll drop that down in the comments after all of this is done. Actually, let's just do that now. Nope, that's not the right one. There we go. Do I want to know why? Okay. So I'll have to put that on LinkedIn. If you are joining us on LinkedIn, I will add this later. All right. With all that being said, thank you for joining me for this Friday's CEO Sit Down. We will be back again next Friday. We are going to go a little bit earlier next time at 10 a.m. PST. That is 1 p.m. Eastern time if you are joining us from the East Coast. Thank you all, and